There's some ducks. And there's the geese. Yeah, I'm pretty sure to go back a few hundred years in time, you would have seen thousands of these birds feeding like this. And seals, you would have seen thousands of seals all along this coast. It would have been an amazing abundance of bird life. The tide is on its way out. Well, what I'm going to do is actually go home and load up this film and recharge some batteries. Yeah, yeah, a few hundred years ago, and 500 years ago, and 600 years ago, there would have been so much food resource down here. And the native peoples, well, if they get tired of hunting one kind of bird, they could always hunt another kind. And if they get tired of one kind of fish, they could always go after another kind of fish. If they got tired of a certain type of shellfish, they could always go for another type of shellfish. Their food resources were so bountiful that the native population had swelled and swelled and swelled to a large number. And then Europeans came. First it was fishermen from Europe. They discovered the Grand Bank and rich fishing grounds. They explored the Labrador coast, the New Brunswick coast. They discovered the St. Lawrence River. And it was those fishermen who first started trading carpenter's axes for carpenter's tools for hides. And that was when the plagues of diseases started ravaging the native peoples. Well, we got the two tugs leaving Courtney Bay. I think they're going to go, the two tugs are going to go back to where they normally berth. That's the ferryway out there. It's about a mile away now. Yeah, it's very, very difficult to believe, but from the time of the fishermen that I spoke of in the 1500s to the 16th century in Plymouth Rock, that was 1604, I believe, there were easily 100,000 native people all along what is now the U.S. East Coast and the coast of and this coast of Canada. There's easily 100,000 people or more that perished from the European diseases. I'm talking smallpox and stuff, diseases like that. Measles and smallpox. And I think in this port here, between the Maliseet and the Passamaquoddy and the Micmac, there were a few thousand people or more living in this port when Champlain arrived in 1604. And he discovered a natural wealth of birds and animals and resources, other resources. And not far from where I'm filming right now, there is an ancient Indian village site. It's where the Reversing Falls Bridge crosses the St. John River. There's a hill. That hill overlooks the St. John River in Reversing Falls. And that was the site of the palisaded Maliseet village that Champlain drew a picture of in 1604 in his exploratory journals. You can actually Google it, Champlain, Navy Island, 1604 Maliseet village. The pronunciation, I believe, is ooey gooey. That's, if you see, that's kind of how it's spelled. And his depiction of that village in his journal shows a palisaded longhouse community. And there must have been hundreds of people that lived there. And that village site is not far away. Not far at all. I'll point out that location as soon as these tugs berth or get moored. At the time Champlain arrived, it was Acadian forest. The Acadian forest was comprised of, I think, 30 different kinds of trees. 30 different kinds of tree species. Okay. Now we're going to go to where the village of Ooey. You see where the smokestacks are? Well, the village of Ooey stood there. Because you have to cross the Reversing Falls Bridge in order to drive past that plant, that pulp mill. And the only signs that there was ever a village now are whatever artifacts that are found on beaches like this one. My indigenous artifact playlist is quite extensive. And I am glad that I was able to rescue them and donate them to the school science program. Yeah, I think after this video comes to an end, I'm going to head back out to the house, recharge some batteries, have some more coffee, and get ready to come back down for around 1. And I'm going to park my butt down. Well, the wind is blowing from the northeast. So I'm going to go down below the rocks on the flat. So I can have some kind of protection from the wind. And I'll see what I can film again. I'm hoping for some seal video today and some great blue heron and cormorants too. That must have been a real paradise. This region must have been a real paradise hundreds of years ago. With so many food resources, you would never starve to death. All you would only need to figure out how to make an arrowhead or a stone knife and fire. And the forest 500 years ago was full of moose. There were very few deer because the woods were the Acadian forest 500 years ago grew thickly and tall and majestically. So the majority of the deer that the Indians hunted were actually moose. And there were caribou. There used to be caribou in Maine and elk. But the last elk and the last caribou, let's see, for the caribou it was in the 40s, because as the forest was thinned out, the deer population increased, and there was a disease that the deer had that affected the moose population and the elk population. I think 1942, 1947, right around then, that was the last of the Maine caribou were hunted out. And it was in the late 18th century that the last elk was hunted in Maine. Now we still have some moose here, but nothing like the numbers that existed prior to late 18th century. There was certain ticks that lived on the deer that once they hit the moose, that it killed off the moose. Oh my God, the sun's coming out. It is a miracle. It's going out. Going out? Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.